Hi, I'm Charl from Pangolin Photo Host, and this is the Canon R6. The last couple of weeks I was privileged to test the Canon R6 here in the field in Chobe National Park. So in this video I'll be sharing my thoughts with photos and videos of the camera's build quality, the image quality, autofocus and animal eye tracking, its low light capabilities, and my conclusion if the R6 is any good for wildlife photography. This video is not sponsored by Canon, but I would like to thank Canon South Africa for borrowing us the Canon R6 and some other gear for testing. So stay tuned for more reviews to come. Although most of the hype in the mirrorless world over the last few months was about the Canon EOS R5 with its 45 megapixel sensor and 8K video capabilities, I as a wildlife photographer was more interested in his little brother, the R6. And you might ask why? Well, pixel count is only one measure of image quality, and an indication of the R6 qualities, especially in a low light performance, is that its 20 million pixel full frame sensor is closely related and its processor is exactly the same as Canon's flagship, the 1DX Mark III, the go-to camera for most wildlife and sports photographers. This means that for $2,500 I can get similar image quality and low light performance than buying Canon's top of the range 1DX Mark III for $6,500. And on top of that, the R6 shares most of the new and exciting skill sets of the more expensive R5, like the built-in stabilization, continuous shooting at up to 12 frames per second using the mechanical shutter, and up to 20 with the electronic shutter, the same rear controls, the same screen articulation, and crucially, the same superior autofocus system including animal eye tracking. Although the R6 is a hybrid camera designed to meet the demands of both photographers and videographers, this review is more concentrating on the photography side of things. Let's first have a look at the camera's build. I'm very happy with how the camera sits in my hand. It has a deep grip like I am used to from all my Canon cameras, and the body feels solid but weighs only 680 grams including batteries, half the weight of my 1DX Mark II. Coming from a Canon DSLR, I could adapt seamlessly as the menu system and button layout is almost identical and provides plenty options to customize the camera. There are 3 dials, the index finger dial, a large dial on the back, and new for me coming from a DSLR is the dial on the top plate. By default, it's used to change the ISO, since there isn't a dedicated ISO button anymore. However, all 3 dials can be set to operate what you find most useful, with the key advantages being that you don't have to take your eye from the viewfinder. The AF joystick or multi-controller is positioned closer to the viewfinder than on Canon DSLRs, but I quickly got used to it. I did find though that the quick menu, info and magnify buttons are difficult to distinguish by touch, and it's easy to press the wrong one with the camera up to your eye. Something I do miss is the LCD screen on top. I am very used to glance at it when picking up my camera. This usually gives me the chance to adjust settings much quicker, when now I have to either tilt the camera to look on the back screen or wait until my eye is on the viewfinder. I also wish there was a quicker way to switch between photo and video mode, rather than having to switch the top dial back and forth, which doesn't come as natural to me. Pressing the record button will start a recording but gives no option to adjust any settings besides exposure and compensation. Only the movie dial will give you access to full manual control and separates the movie settings from stills. However, these aren't deal breakers for me, and in contrast, I am loving the articulated touchscreen for low angle shots and having an electronic viewfinder for immediate feedback on color, white balance and exposure. The quality of the viewfinder is a little bit lower than the R5, but definitely competitive for its class. With the high refresh rate enabled, I didn't experience any lagging, and although there is blackouts when shooting with the mechanical shutter, I found it only to be visible on the single shots. In burst mode, it is so quick that I don't even notice it. There are two UHS 2 SD card slots for storage, and with the camera's relatively low pixel count, it means that it can shoot over 1000 bursts in JPEG and HEIF, or around 240 photos in RAW format before it will slow down and buffer. I generally prefer the faster and more robust CF Express card. But on the upside, the SD cards are more affordable and I don't need to invest in another CF Express card reader. Although the R6 uses a new battery with a capacity boost of 14%, I appreciate that they kept the form of its predecessor, so I can still make use of the batteries from my older 7D2 and 5D4. The new LPE6NH battery is rated to get around 380 shots per charge when using the EVF. But I managed to get more than double than that with just a few tweaks in the menu. You can check out the video link on top for more information on that and some other helpful wildlife settings on the R6. And as always, if you like to support us, please take time and like the video. As a wildlife photographer, I would definitely opt to buy a battery grip with this camera. It is a lot of extra money, but it doubles the camera's endurance. It nicely balanced the weight of my 500mm prime lens, and I can make use of the vertical grip and buttons as I'm used to from my 1DX2. Now there is basic weather sealing on the R6, but less extensive than on the Pro bodies. It feels nicely and solid, but for peace of mind, I'll probably won't take it out in heavy rain like with my 1DX Mark II. When testing the R6, I was most excited to see whether it could match up with my DSLR in terms of autofocus speed and accuracy. And I must say, I'm impressed. Thanks to Canon's dual pixel autofocus 2, in which every pixel can be used for face detection. Autofocus works exceptionally well, even in low light. In addition, having focus area coverage across the entire frame is a huge advantage when tracking birds in flight and composing, especially with larger animals. Canon has provided a good array of focus area selection modes and made it very easy to cycle through them via the AF area and manual function buttons. But it's the eye detection and tracking modes that I really wanted to test. I shot with autofocus set to track across the entire frame, with eye detection on and subject to detect set to animals. Canon said it works with cats, dogs and birds, but it did a decent job on wild animals as well. Birds, however, were the species where I found the eye tracking that work at its best. Have you ever seen the eye of a red bishop? They are black on a black face. There is no real contrast there to speak of, and yet the R6 picks up the eye with mesmerizing accuracy. Even when the branch he sits on is swinging in the wind and I'm photographing from a moving boat. Achieving focus on birds in mid-air has never been so easy and is probably my favorite time to make use of the animal eye tracking. Of course, it isn't flawless, and whenever it can't pick up the eye, it enlarges its autofocus zone and simply tracks the head or entire subject instead. And although the camera doesn't lose focus on the subject, this can be a disadvantage when shooting on a wide aperture where the depth of field is so small that focusing anywhere but the eye can ruin the shot. I found this to be even more true when focusing on larger mammals, as the distance between the eyes and other body parts like ears and noses that the camera likes to lock on is greater. Don't get me wrong, it still does a pretty good job, but without you having any control over it. So the days of pre-selecting an autofocus point aren't quite gone yet, and I definitely had to switch between the two systems. It takes a while to get used to, but once you do, it provides a whole new shooting experience. As a little tip, whenever the eye tracking is lost on an animal, Use a single focus point and regain focus on the subject before switching back to tracking. This seems to do the trick in most cases. There were a few occasions where the autofocus needed a bit of help, when the subject was far from the background and focus accidentally locked on infinity. The only solution was to manually focus to give the autofocus something to look for, and only then could I grab the subject again. Allow me to demonstrate. I placed the L far away from the background and then focused on infinity. Trying to refocus on the little L in front isn't a problem for my DSLR 1DX Mark II. Whereas the R6 just stay locked on the background and I have to help out with manual focus until the cameras find definition again. If you have a mirrorless camera, regardless the brand, and you have experienced this issue as well, please let us know in the comments down below. So while the animal eye autofocus can struggle to find its mark at times, it is an incredible tool to be able to reach for, and I can finally compose my image without having to shift the focus point around. To be fair though, composing your images has generally become much easier with an improved joystick that moves smoothly and an added option to use the rear screen as an autofocus touchpad, although I still prefer the former. Something I noticed was that the spot AF point is quite a bit larger than on my DSLR, and therefore I am less precise when focusing. Not sure why this is, as in the eye tracking mode, smaller points exist. If any of you maybe knows, let us know in the comments down below. If you are a Canon DSLR user like me, eyeing up the EOS R, you probably won't go out and buy a new set of RF lenses straight away, but instead use your existing EF lenses via Canon's RF EF mount adapter. I've tested my Canon 100-400 Mark II, my Canon 500 Mark II, and the third-party Sigma 150-600mm contemporary lens on the R6, and all of the lenses work flawlessly to their abilities. The only difference was that there was a minimal restriction on the focus area when using the Sigma lens. I also used my Canon 1.4 Mark III teleconverter on both my 500mm and 100-400mm Mark II lenses in combination with the RF EF adapter mount, and it worked perfectly. Focus was quick and precise without any restrictions on the focusing areas. And of course, as usual, you will lose a stop of light. But that is all the compromise there is. With its 20 million pixel sensor, the EOS R may not capture as much details as its rivals, but it makes up for this in other aspects of image quality. The larger pixels can take in more light, and with a standard sensitivity range of ISO 100 to 102,400, this camera's low light performance is outstanding. At low sensitivities, it delivers finely detailed images with attractive color and barely any noise. Plus, the low ISO dynamic range is remarkable. At ISO 250, I could pull up the shadows all the way to retrieve details in elephant skin without any visible loss of quality. There's barely any drop in quality on increasing the sensitivity to ISO 1600, but let's look at ISO 8000. Noise-free it isn't, but what you've got here looks like film grain rather than anything terrible disruptive. And unlike some cameras at such a high ISO, there isn't a color shift to contend with. With a little more work in post, you could reduce the noise, particularly in the defocused background even more. The next image is at 12,800. Again, it's grainy, noticeably so is the background, but the areas of the fine detail looks really sharp, and I have no hesitation at all shooting at high ISO if the situation demands. It's only at ISO 25,600 that noise has a real impact, with fine detail starting to blur and color saturation fading. But still, I would consider it usable if something once in a lifetime unfolds in front of me. Overall, the R6 sensor delivers an excellent image quality and even can produce beautiful large prints. Perhaps not billboard size, but few people need that anyway, and I really appreciate that the RAW files aren't that huge. The 5-axis in-body stabilization is also very effective when shooting in low light. Canon claims up to 8 stops of shake reduction with supported lenses. And I got sharp shots down to a 15th of a second with a stabilized lens, given that the animal was static, of course. The stabilization isn't only useful in low light though, but for everyone capturing video too, making it far more stable to film out of the hand. Switching our attention to video. The EOS R allows recording at 4K resolution up to 60 frames a second. Switch to Full HD and you also get 120 frames per second high frame rate option, something that I like to use a lot. Just be aware that there will be no sound recorded at this frame rate. Canon Log gives output suitable for color grading in post-production, and a zebra pattern display is available to warn of overexposure. The camera will shoot video in an auto exposure mode if you hit the record button during normal shooting. Or there's a full movie exposure mode which gives you access to a lot more control. The great thing about using the movie dial is that this uses its own settings, distinct from those used in the stills mode. This means you can jump back and forth without the settings you're using for one impacting the other. Although overheating generally isn't an issue for me, as I normally film very short clips, I have used this camera for vlogging style production, where we did film Full HD, 60 frames a second, on and off for roughly about 4 hours in the sun around 30 degrees Celsius. Just before finishing up, the overheat symbol came on and I had to wait a few minutes before being able to film the last sequence. Other than that, I didn't film long enough to have any other issues. Let's wrap things up by counting down the 3 things I like about a camera and 3 things I don't. Starting off with the negatives. Number 1. It might seem minor to some, but I really wish that the R6 had a top LCD screen like my other cameras to quickly check my settings out in the field. Number 2. I would have appreciated if there was a much easier way to switch from photo mode to video mode with separate settings and full control, especially from a hybrid camera like this. Number 3. The autofocus occasionally locking on the background. Although this only have happened a few times, it could cost me valuable shots, and I would expect the camera to be able to refocus on the subject in an instant once focus is lost. I really hope that this can be solved in future firmware updates. But let's talk about the amazing things. Number 1. The extremely quiet but efficient shutter. 12 frames per second mechanical and up to 20 frames per second on electronic shutter is handy for any wildlife photographer. And although I love the shutter sound of my 1DX, I do see the benefit of operating almost silently, especially when dealing with wildlife. Number 2. How brilliantly the camera works with EF lenses via the EF-RF adapter. A big advantage for me, being able to use all my existing glass without compromise. Number 3. Of course, the animal eye tracking. What a great add-on to Canon's brilliant autofocus system that will help to increase my birds in flight keeper rate. So, would I buy the EOS R6? Yes, as a secondary body to my 1DX Mark II, I wouldn't hesitate. I currently own the 5D Mark IV in addition to my Pro body, and testing the EOS R6 convinced me to be willing to trade my 5D4 for this mirrorless camera. The animal eye tracking, a much faster frame rate and in-body stabilization is worth much more for me than the higher pixels of the 5D Mark IV. Having said that, as a professional wildlife photographer, I'm definitely not ready yet to let go of my 1DX Mark II just yet. The strong and robust build, the excellent weather sealing, a battery life that can keep me going for much longer, and in my opinion a slightly faster focus acquisition are important factors that I can't ignore. But the Canon R6 is also not meant to be a pro body. Nevertheless, I still recommend this camera to any professional wildlife photographer as a decent second body for half the price of a full pro body camera. And of course, to all the enthusiastic amateurs out there that mainly want a great photo camera with the benefits of shooting short high-res videos. If you are concerned about the relatively low pixels, I can assure for most users 20 million pixels is plenty. Even printing large files with high ISOs will create beautiful images with sharp details and great color. Thank you for watching this review, and don't forget to subscribe to see a detailed comparison between the R5 and R6 coming soon. And as always, leave a comment down below how you like this video. Bye bye and see you soon.